All right, fellow Go-Givers, Juwan Buford coming at you again from the Metro Detroit area with my comrade today, guest Sean Farrell, who is going to be helping us with a really important topic that we don't talk about enough in the entrepreneur community. Oftentimes we just kind of jump into our thing. We launch our product and service, and we don't have a discussion about the legal framework that's required to make sure that your business is built to last. So you know how we do it here. We learn things, we do things, we evaluate, and we share what we do. And I am appreciative and excited to have you here with us, Sean.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah.
So one of the most important things that we have to say up front, and we hate doing this, but it's industry standard, 2 disclaimers. The first is everything that I express in this interview, in this podcast, are my own views. They are not the views of the Allen Law Group. The second is whatever we discuss is not legal advice. This is for educational purposes only.
All right, fantastic. Okay. If you don't mind, give people a brief introduction. Who are you? Who's Sean?
Sure. I'm a corporate attorney at a law firm called the Allen Law Group in Detroit. So I work with startups, small to medium businesses, and emerging tech companies.
Fantastic. And if you don't mind me inquiring, because we had a fascinating discussion the first time we connected.
We did.
Which is what really excited me about the opportunity to have you here.
Mm-hmm.
B2B is not just something you do as a job, something like you're really passionate about.
Yeah.
Like, what has impacted your career up until now?
So one of the things that drives me is working with creatives.
Yes.
So I was a musician back in my prior life.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I think about entrepreneurship, when I think about music, the thing that ties it all together is people who are creative and trying to build something.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what drives me every day. I love working with people who are excited, who are building something, who are, building the future. So yeah, that's what drives me.
Okay. And if we were to fast forward, let's say a year from now, I'm not going to dare say 3-5 years from now. It's chaotic as the market is now.
It's crazy.
What do you see your role within the B2B community or the B2B space?
It's such an exciting time right now with AI, and it's democratized all these tools that most people just didn't have the funds for previously. Mm-hmm. So I think my job is going to be, and it's changing the legal landscape as well.
Yes.
So I think lawyers are going to play a different role than we do now. It's going to be less about document review. It's going to be less about, the filing and the research, because mm-hmm. AI is just so powerful. So in a year from now, I think I'm going to be on the ground making connections and creatively solving people problems, mm-hmm. more so than just the legal issues themselves.
Yes.
So I think a good lawyer in the future is going to have a great network, really be creative, and be a bit of a generalist, because AI is going to be so powerful at all the specialties. Mm-hmm. And so the people who are going to thrive are the ones that have the network and then have the ability to think from first principles across a whole wide array of domains. So I think my role, and I'll just kind of actually answer your question, I think my role is going to be really getting into the Detroit ecosystem at the ground level and working with founders as they're starting, so they have legal frameworks from the start, mm-hmm. as opposed to coming in on the back end where it's costlier and they've already made mistakes.
I like it. So you're really going to be operating, I'm assuming business plan attorneys do operate this way, but it's going to be more of an emphasis on the art. It's going to be more of an emphasis on the strategy. You're going to be having more qualitative discussions as opposed to someone walking into your office and they got a dumpster fire taking place. And now,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And what we've seen in just the legal market is there's something called a fractional general counsel. It's kind of in vogue right now to have a fractional CTO, or what it means is you don't have enough money, or necessarily you don't want to spend the money to have your own attorney 24/7 just working with your company. Mm-hmm. So I really like this type of legal relationship where when you're a fractional general counsel, you're sitting at the center of the entity and you're looking out at the landscape and you're saying, hey, here's all the legal landmines that you have to avoid. As opposed to if you just call an attorney for a contract, mm-hmm. they don't know enough, they know just enough about your business to write the contract and draft it, but they're not strategically at the center of your business, kind of side by side with the executive team, looking out at the landscape and directing. So that is really, the type of legal relationship that I like the most is a fractional general counsel.
Oh, but that's exciting. So I'm going to jump right into it in terms of the primary issue that I come across in working with business owners, mm-hmm. right? And one of the questions they'll ask is, look, I'm just getting started. right? I don't know my left hand from my right. I just have this ideal, and I'm excited to go out here and launch, start taking on clients. I really don't feel like I need an attorney. I don't think I'm there yet. Yeah. What would be your response to that question?
Sometimes they're right. I mean, so when I work with startups, you're usually in triage mode because generally there's not enough funds up front to pay for legal. And a lot of people think of legal like that. It's like, I'll call them when there's an issue. Right now, I just need to get contracts. I need to get the right people in the room. So sometimes they're right at the very early stages. But what I will say is, once you are thinking about forming an entity and you're actually going to be doing business with the outside world, you should at least have a few conversations with an attorney. And this has to do with protecting your personal assets.
Yes.
It's one of the primary reasons we create business, actual legal entities for your business, is to sequester and safeguard your personal assets from your business assets. And as you scale, obviously the entity lets you cooperate with more people. So there's kind of other benefits as the company grows. But in the early stages, your prime goal is to keep your personal assets out of it. And when the company's new, you don't have collateral, you don't have equipment, you don't have anything to give up for a loan or a lease, right? So what they want to do, especially when you're just starting your business, is they want to say, okay, the business doesn't have anything, but you do. You have a home, a car. So we're going to take collateral from your personal assets, and they're going to collateralize it for you to get something for your business. And so I think it's really important that people understand, okay, I'm setting up my legal entity. I need to talk to an attorney to figure out how to best do that. So it's a really good inflection point just from the start. At least have a few conversations.
All right. So something I encounter frequently as well is that generally speaking, if I talk to 100 business owners, 99.9% of them will have an LLC. When they've reached that stage, right, to start taking things seriously. But when I ask them, why did you choose an LLC? It's just like somebody told me to, right? What are some considerations that business owners should take into account when they are looking to actually begin to structure their business, whether it be LLC, S Corp, C Corp, L3C? I'm going to defer to you. But what are some of the things that people should take into account before they structure a business?
That's a great question. One of the things I think about is, what is your plan for the next 3 to 5 years of your business? If your plan is to get heavy investment from angel investors and outside investors, and you're going to do a pre-seed, raise, or you're going to look for, a Series A, Series B, and you want to exit, if that's your goal, you're going to want to create probably a Delaware C Corp, a very specific entity. That's the industry standard for investors. That's what investors want. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Some of it has to do with the creation of stocks and shares. But Delaware itself has a really long and historied and complicated but very successful corporate regulatory scheme through the state. And so they have their chancery court. There's a lot of things about it that investors really like. So this is sort of how I would start. I would say, what is your plan for this business? Now, on the other hand, if you are looking, let's say you want to do a junk removal company, and it's going to be you and your brother, and you're going to drive a truck and just remove junk, LLC is a great vehicle for that. If you're not trying to turn this into a franchise and scale across the nation, LLCs are great for flexibility, simplicity, if you want them to be. You can, lawyers can come in and make LLCs more complicated, but they really are simple. And this includes with taxes. So LLCs are taxed as a pass-through entity, which means that it actually, the tax just gets applied onto the managing member's personal tax return. Whereas with a C Corp, you have what's called double taxation. So you have to pay the corporate tax on the front end, and then they tax the dividends as well. So there's a lot of strategic questions that you have to ask the business owner, which is kind of, what are your goals? What does the business do? Where are we trying to be in 3 to 5 years? And that gives you a sense of, okay, here's the landscape. This is probably why this legal entity would be better than this one.
What are some of the mistakes people make, whether it's setting up a C Corp or LLC? What are some of the common compliance errors that people make?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let's start with LLCs. If you don't work with an attorney, it's very simple to create the LLC. You just have to file with, we're in Michigan, so you have to file with Michigan LARA, $50, you get your LLC. But you have no documentation underneath that actually that discusses how the business is going to be governed, operated. And so what you want is an operating agreement that actually discusses, okay, here's how the business is going to be run. Here's what happens if I die. Here's what happens if XYZ. Here's how we vote. you want all the rules of how that LLC is going to be managed. So I see a lot of people take the first step, they create the legal entity, and then they just assume, well, now I have this liability shield and I'm invincible, right? They don't think about insurance. They don't think about all of these other aspects of how to protect themselves because they think I have this liability shield. And maybe in a little bit, maybe we can talk about the liability shield and some of those common mistakes.
Yes.
On the C Corp side, it's something similar, but it's usually, if you decide to make a C Corp, you're going to probably work with an attorney because it's hard to file in Delaware and it's a little costlier. And so you're probably going to have bylaws and you're going to have all the corporate governance documents that you want. The common mistakes I see is that people don't actually follow through. So they don't actually have board resolutions, affirming all of the sort of actions that they're taking. And so later on, when they go to get investments from investors, they say, okay, let's see your data room. And when they look in there, there's just compliance red flag after compliance red flag. You have people with vested equity who are no longer part of the company, but there's no board resolutions. So those are you see two different kinds of mistakes. Usually on the LLC side is they don't have enough formal documentation. It's a similar problem on the C Corp side, but it almost looks worse because you've done all the legroom to create all the rules, but then you don't follow them yourself.
Okay. So for the entrepreneurs who are listening in, and we start throwing around verbiage like operating agreements, bylaws. We haven't really talked about corporate minutes, right? And things like that.
Yeah.
I imagine a lot of entrepreneurs, they're not even thinking about that initially. They're just, hey, I want to take on some clients. I want to generate some revenues. I need to take care of my family. Whatever the case may be, right? What is the impact of not having not taken these steps, whether it be in terms of securing capital, whether it be conflicts that can arise, right? Because one of the first things you learn as an entrepreneur, sooner or later, most conflicts have nothing to do with merit or principle. Oftentimes someone's mad at you, they're trying to get over on you. Like, I don't want to scare people, but what do people need to be aware of?
Yeah. So we talked about the investor impact on the C Corp side. So I'll leave that alone. What we see a lot, and you see this a lot with multiple founders, is you have friends, you might be best friends your whole life, you start a business together, sometimes it's family members, and so you think, we don't need an operating agreement, like we're best friends, we know exactly how this business is going to run. And it's kind of a cliche at this point, but we see time and time again, if you don't establish your operating agreement, which discusses how everything is going to be handled, a good operating agreement anticipates everything that can go wrong and addresses it. So if you don't have that and you're just going to rely on your relationships change. Friends come and go, families fall out. And so what you end up with is you have costly disputes that usually end up in litigation. It severely negatively impacts the business. And so, aside from sort of the regulatory and investor complaints, like if you don't have the underlying documents put together that describe what happens in worst case scenarios, you're leaving it up to the court. You're leaving it up to a default statute in whatever jurisdiction you're in, and that's an extremely costly and usually fatal mistake.
I hate to make this comparison because I know it may come off so pejorative, but in my mind, it's almost like family court.
Yeah.
If you don't have your affairs in order, nobody wins when the family feuds, and it's just going to cause more drama, more financial headache and stress. It can ruin relationships. Right?
Absolutely.
It's same thing in the business community. Like if you don't have these affairs in order, not only are the two business owners going through a divorce, but all the relationships you have together, vendors, contractors, investors, everybody, right? So one of the common challenges that I have observed as well, particularly people provide services, right? So they'll have their independent contractor agreements together. Some of the time, right? Yeah, some individuals are a little bit more sophisticated. They're using MOUs, they're using LOIs, right? Could you talk briefly about why these things are important? Because I cannot tell you how many times I've worked with business owners, and it's just a handshake and a smile, right? Whether they're providing residential cleaning services, whether or not they're delivering balloons, putting on events, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Why are these documents necessary?
Oh, man. This is a great topic. The number one reason is about liability. What you're trying to do is define the scope of services and who is ultimately liable for something when something goes wrong. So especially if you have just a handshake deal and you send one of your employees to, let's say, go perform services somewhere, and they end up hurting someone else who's at the facility. If you don't have a contract together, you are getting sued. Your entity is getting sued. And there's really no recourse there. You're going to have to fight it out in court. It's going to be unbelievably costly, and it can destroy businesses. So these are the sorts of things. I mean, when you get into a business relationship, it's hard up front to think about everything that can go wrong because you're so excited about what's going right. And you're so excited about the opportunity. And I think it's important in that moment just to take a quick pause and realize that the people that you are doing the handshake deal with are most likely going to respond even better if you say, hey, let's formalize this. Because then they know how you operate and they go, okay, yeah, he's got his business together. He's really thinking forward on this. It's also important to distinguish what type of relationship you have. The independent contractor relationship and the employee relationship, and all these relationships are not as clear as people think. And so it's really important to actually define that on paper because there's different liabilities that come with both. For instance, if you improperly designate folks as independent contractors and it's later determined that they're employees, you can owe all the back taxes on the benefits. I mean, there's a huge liability there. There's a famous Uber case out in California where the Uber drivers who were independent contractors brought a big case saying, hey, no, we're actually employees. And the courts almost enforced it, which would have been an astronomical amount of money they would have owed to all their drivers. And I believe Californians actually passed a proposition to stop that. But that's a type of liability, and it happens even with our biggest companies. So it's really important to have everything in writing. And working with an attorney, I think, is also extremely important because there's going to be things like indemnification and very legal, nuanced issues that, even with the help of AI, I think people will probably struggle with without, formal legal education.
You just said something that was going to be my next question, right? Because you have this terminology that's out there. And something that I've noticed frequently when I'm looking at documents that people bring to my attention, and I tell them, look, you need to have an attorney review this. This concept of indemnification, what does that mean in layman's terms to an entrepreneur? Yeah,
what it means is that depending on how you agree through the indemnification, you're essentially stepping in to either defend or pay for someone. So let's say you have two parties who are working together. You have an independent contractor and the one who is employing them. If someone gets injured and they sue both of you, an indemnification provision will say who is going to defend the parties, who has to pay who back. There might be attorney's fees in there. So it becomes an extremely nuanced legal issue. It's not as simple as it sounds, because indemnification provisions sometimes are half a page long, and they're extremely nuanced about who's the indemnity. Is it your officers, your directors? Is it just the entity? And so this is something that's just one of those really nuanced issues that if you don't take it seriously, can come back to cost you, millions. We see it routinely where poorly drafted, poorly reviewed indemnification provisions are a killer.
Yeah, I'm listening to you, and I'm thinking about a business owner I dealt with several years ago, she'll remain nameless. But I remember she got into this huge issue because she had a kind of like a child center, right? And she was paying her employees underneath the table, and a conflict arose with the employee and one of the parents. And then on top of that, some type of situation was triggered where I guess because the employee had not been paying taxes after years of being paid under the table, they ended up fingering the business owner, and I don't need to tell you what transpired next, right? Over a period of 6 to 9 months of litigation, the issues, the paperwork just put them out of business. And a lot of entrepreneurs don't consider that. Like I understand when you're bootstrapping, you're doing what you have to do when you're on a beer budget, but some of these things are going to end up costing you way more down the line. It only takes one issue, one upset employee, staff person, client, whatever the case may be, right?
And you sometimes have these where they pivot into criminal matters. I mean, it can cost you more than just the business, right? It's extremely important.
Something else you just shared that I'm a huge proponent of having access to an attorney to handle these matters is oftentimes people, when they're first starting up their business, they're having issues related to credibility, right? Particularly if they're looking to work with enterprise, larger companies, right? And, I try to encourage people to understand that, look, how you show up matters. If you're dealing with a business owner that has been established for more than a handful of years, they know what to look for, what type of questions to ask. And if you don't have your affairs in order, it makes it look like you're not an adult in business, and you'd be surprised how many times you'll get declined or the person will just pass on you, not because you don't have a good product or service. It's not that you're not a quote-unquote honest or earnest person, but they don't want to do business with you because of the risk associated with it.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, look, there's so many options out there. So if you're providing a service, I'm sure there are others who are doing the same, and so you're competing. And so if your competition is showing up and all of they have contracts and everything's in order, it's just simpler to go with them, even if they cost a little bit more. It just, people see that, and they see diligence, they see thoughtfulness, that people are putting that kind of attention into their business, and it speaks volumes.
So I know a lot of new entrepreneurs don't understand the nuances or differences between a W-2 or a 1099, and then even more don't understand how to necessarily protect themselves, right, when they're onboarding talent. What are some of the things or advice you would give to a business owner to help them avoid some of the landmines associated with onboarding talent?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the first things that you're going to look at to figure out, okay, are we in the 1099, the contractor space, where they're an independent contractor, or the W-2, which is your employee space? And different jurisdictions have different tests, but generally they're looking at who has control in the relationship. So when I hire someone to come paint my home, it's very clear. They come in the truck with their logo on it. They show up. They usually tell me the time. We pick a date together, but they say, all right, I'm coming at 9 a.m. Okay. So it's about how much control the folks have, excuse me, in terms of managing their own affairs and their own business. When you look at an employee relationship, this is someone where the entity is actually dictating, hey, you have to be here at this time. You're not allowed to go provide, these same services to other folks. Sometimes they have uniforms you have to wear. You're controlling a lot about how the employee is working with the business. And so that's the first test you do, is you look at who has control. Uber drivers are a good example because they drive Lyft, they drive Uber, they have multiple apps running. So it's more clear that that's an independent contractor relationship. They get to pick their times. They get to pick most things about their schedule, which rides they accept, et cetera. So that's the first test of trying to figure out, okay, are we in the 1099 or the W-2 space? Once you figure that out, you're going to want something. If it's an independent contractor, you're going to want basically a professional services agreement where it's going to lay out, the full scope of what they're doing, how much they're going to get paid, how do you terminate, all of these factors. For the employee, the W-2 side, you're going to want different things. You're going to want an employee handbook, which has the rules of how your business operates and interfaces with employees. How can they take time off? Who do they have to get, approval from to do X, Y, and Z? You're going to want them to sign off and acknowledge that handbook, that they received it. Now, Michigan, we're an at-will state, which means essentially either the employer or the employee can terminate the employment agreement and employee-employer relationship at any time for any reason that's not illegal. So that's important. If you create a standalone agreement for the employee, that can actually cause some serious liability and issues, which is interesting because most people think, well, you guys have been saying contracts are good. Why would I not want a very formal employment agreement? The reason is because sometimes that can actually subvert that at-will relationship. So if it's just an at-will relationship, you have lots of freedom of how you can terminate and fire someone. Once you put them under an agreement, you can sometimes create basically a for-cause relationship where you can only terminate it for certain reasons. And so you're going to be limiting yourself. So working with an attorney is extremely important, not just to classify what type of relationship it is, but what underlying documents do we need and strategically need so that you have the most freedom and ability to maneuver.
Okay. So one of the reasons why I hear individuals who may become reluctant to take on talent, despite the fact it becomes absolutely necessary, right? They're wearing all the hats in the beginning. You're trying to be CEO, CFO, CTO, CIO. I don't even want to go through all the acronyms. They're trying to put all the fires out. They're trying to serve the function of dealing with taxes, HR. Man, that talk that I gave or talks I gave yesterday are now catching up. In many respects, they're trying to serve all these roles. Mm-hmm. And, they know they need to take on talent. They know they need to take on help. But they're going to have concerns about, okay, what if I partner with someone? What if I hire someone? They take my ideals. Mm-hmm. I hear this all the time. Yep. They learn about my business model. Mm-hmm. They take my clients. Yep. Move across the street and become my competition. Yep. What can we do to alleviate those concerns?
Yeah, I mean, that is the number one thing. When you've created something unique, mm-hmm. or even if you're a year in and you've found some incredible relationships and have these clients, or you have this new way of doing something, mm-hmm. it's really scary to share it. It's scary to share it with anyone. Now, there's a lot of, on the legal side, there's lots you can do to protect that, from mutual non-disclosure agreements for when you're first meeting people, mm-hmm. non-solicitation agreements. Non-solicitation agreements, essentially, you're confining what the person that you're contracting with can do in terms of interfacing with your clients, in terms of, essentially, it protects your trade secrets, your business assets. It mm-hmm. protects everything about your business and says, hey, we're going to work together. You're going to learn things about my business and how I do it. And you can't then take that and just go compete with me. Mm-hmm. So non-solicitation, non-compete, and non-disclosure agreements, these come together to help create some of those protections. It's obviously, it's not that cut and dry. And one of the issues, and I think one of the things that scares, founders is, look, I don't want to have to enforce this legally. I mean, if they just violate this, mm-hmm. I then have to go enforce it legally. That costs a lot. So, I think doing sort of, and this is less legal advice, but just knowing on the front end, having maybe a longer relationship with people, instead of just jumping into a new relationship and saying, hey, you have the skills that I like. I met you at a conference. Mm-hmm. Come on, and now we work together. Mm-hmm. I think having a little cooling vetting period of really getting to know someone, even if it's quick, if it's over 2-3 months, mm-hmm. getting to know them more before you jump right into a formal relationship with someone. I usually give that guidance to my founders, which is use your best judgment. If you're worried the opportunity is going to fall away, mm-hmm. do what you have to do. But if this is someone who lives nearby and they're kind of in your orbit, just get to know them first on a personal level.
Now, something I've done periodically that has worked for me, right? There's a capital acquisition firm that I've partnered with periodically. I mean, the owner, founder of the company, and I, we've been doing business and working together for over a decade. Something that we did for the first maybe 6-7 years of our relationship is she has her company, I have mine. And when a project needed to be done, we needed to execute on a project, what we end up doing is creating a relationship between our companies as opposed to she contracting my services or vice versa.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
I've tried to explain this concept to individuals. I think you'd be better suited to explain why that could be more advantageous. Like, I'm dealing with a business owner now who's been working with a good friend of his for the last 3-4 years. Mm-hmm. And now they have divergent ideals about where to take the company. They have divergent ideals of what winning looks like. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not like it hasn't become cantankerous yet, but these issues are bubbling up. Yeah. And what I share with them is, you might have been better off just, he has his company, you have yours. You work together on these projects to fill each other out.
Yes. So this is essentially a joint venture agreement.
Yes.
And this is such a smart and intelligent way to move if you have people with two entities and you guys have great synergy, especially if you have synergy in a third of your business. Mm-hmm. A joint venture is amazing. It allows you to keep and protect your individual IP, your trade secrets, your assets, your liabilities separate. But just when you need to work together, the joint venture agreement governs how that cooperation operates and how that looks like. So that's an incredibly intelligent way to go about it if you both have sort of a formal enough entity to do that. Again, you're going to want to work with an attorney. You're going to want to work with someone who's in this space because they're going to be able to intuit and address probably issues that you're not thinking of in the moment. And so it's important to work with an attorney. But to your point, to protect your IP, to protect your assets, and to keep everything separate while still working together, it's a great solution.
Now, you mentioned IP several times. We're going to go here. Yeah. Man, there's so much information, misinformation out there about IP.
Yeah.
had a situation with a business owner. She owns a clothing store. And she did what we oftentimes refer to as a ghetto trademark, ghetto copyright, right? She believed she could just mail these documents to herself, and that was sufficient enough to protect her business. And she found out the hard way it wasn't. Yeah. Somebody literally opened up a similar business, different adjacent city.
Yep.
The name was very similar. As a matter of fact, I don't think there was a difference at all.
Mm-hmm.
And she went to confront the business owner, and when they began to tangle legally, she found out there was basically no recourse available to her.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that for a moment.
Yeah. This is very common. Look, I have a client. It's a similar story. They, they were actually operating down in Arizona under a specific name. It was an event company for music, so a music event company. There was a similar entity in Detroit with a very similar name.
Mm-hmm.
My client filed for trademark.
Mm.
This entity filed shortly after them, and it became a fight. You were in court trying to figure out who came up with this trademark first. But there are very specific periods about when you can contest that. So there are people who think, hey, I mailed myself something. I can show proof that I've kind of had this trademark or this IP earlier than anyone else. If you're not constantly looking through the federal database and the copyrights and trademarks, seeing who's filed, this can blow past you. You have no clue that someone is filing and perfecting the intellectual property that you think is yours.
Yes.
It happens just right underneath your nose. You don't even think to check this database. You're not working with an attorney, and then all of a sudden you get a demand letter in the mail saying you're using our IP. Shuts down your business. The other thing I'll say about kind of perfecting your IP is if you ever want investors or you want to sell your company some acquisition later on, they are going to need you to have your IP protected and perfected. It's too much liability to not have that. And honestly, the filings are not extremely expensive on the front end. It's something that people should, once they know that this business is going to be successful, I think that's one of the first things you want to look at doing. And if you're in a creative space, probably earlier than that. So if you're doing design or anything creative, it's extremely important.
So this question comes up frequently as well. It's really rudimentary, but so absolutely important. What is the difference between a copyright and a trademark?
Sure. Trademark, think of your business mark, your logo, right? So it's different than copyright can be, it's art, it's music, it's film, so they're different in kind. The trademark is the mark you use for trade. And people also are always very interested in patents. Patent law, and I'm not a patent attorney, so that's a very specific area of law. The lawyers actually go through sort of directed undergraduate degrees in science and engineering to be able to actually really understand schematics and drawings and all these things. People have this idea that, oh, I've invented this thing, it's new to me, so I can go get a patent, or I just have the intellectual property rights for this thing. It's so much more complicated than that on the patent side. But in terms of copyright and trademark, it does not cost a lot of money to work with an attorney to just do a search, see what's out there. The other IP that people don't talk enough about is trade dress. This one's really fun. So when you think of Coca-Cola, you think of the red can, you think of the writing.
Right.
When you think of, there's a jeweler called Tiffany's, there's that Tiffany's blue, that teal. It's not trademark, it's not copyright, it's trade dress. It's sort of how you package your product and how consumers see your product. I think that's a really kind of underutilized IP that people should think more about. So if you really have distinctive branding, think about it more holistically than just what your mark is. Think about the packaging more holistically, and how you can protect that or use it to kind of generate more revenue.
Okay. So at this stage of my entrepreneur journey, I'm starting to work more and more with business owners who, quite frankly, they're tired of climbing stairs, right? They've made up their mind that they want to pivot and they want to golf. They want to enjoy their grandchildren. They want to relocate, and they want to pass the business on. This is an issue, too, to the next generation, but surprisingly, a lot of times the children aren't interested in the business. But that's a whole other discussion we could have. But they want someone to either buy the business or they want to transition this business on to someone else. And man, what are the consequences at the end of the day? Because we've talked about how you set up the business entity. We've talked about documents and the foundation you need to have there. Now we're talking about IP. And, you know, coming from a quote unquote layperson, I know I'm not doing an effective enough job of telling business owners that, look, you should be thinking about these things in advance, and how problematic it is, how much, how detrimental it is to not have your affairs in order in advance when you reach that point in your entrepreneur journey.
Yeah. Succession is incredible. We could talk about succession probably for the next hour. And again, I'll flag this. I'm not a probate attorney, because part of this has to do with, look, if you are a smaller business or you have an LLC, a single member LLC, and you kind of own the whole business, when you pass away, if you just have nothing in writing, you could have a will. That could help direct the court through probate, which is a legal process, kind of what happens with your business assets. But think about that for a minute. The probate process can take a year. It can take a long time for people to figure out where assets are going to go. In that period, no one can run the business. Your clients are gone. Everything's fallen apart. And by default, in Michigan, that is where the LLC and the interest in that business will go. It'll go to probate. Which would pass down to your heirs eventually. But like I said, people will fight about wills. People will come out of the woodworks and say, he wrote something to me on a napkin in 1995, right? You get these crazy stories. So one of the things I think is really important when people think about succession is think about your operating agreement, your underlying agreement that governs your entity. It should have spelled out in your operating agreement, what happens if I become incapacitated? What happens when I'm deceased? Do we have other members, other founders in this? Are they going to take over my interest? Is the business going to actually buy back my interest? Because if you think about it, if you have 3 founders, you don't necessarily want one of the founders' kids coming in to run the business with you, right? 15 years in, or someone you don't know, a random heir that you haven't even met before. So you want to think through all of these worst case scenarios, and no one likes really thinking about what happens when I'm gone. But it's really important for the business. We have a probate case right now where it was a business owner, a very successful business owner, and he didn't have any of his affairs in order, and it was a client-facing kind of high-demand business. It's gone. It's been 4 months with no one able to take over the business because it's fallen into probate. So that all of the revenue that was being generated is gone, and they're divvying up the assets now. That could have gone on to someone else. It could have been sold. Another member could have taken over that business seamlessly through an operating agreement. The other thing I'll say about succession is, eventually you may want to, right now we have the gray tsunami. So we have all of these small business owners who are aging out of work, and they want to sell their business. One of the things that's really important when people are looking to either purchase or sell a business is they want to look and say, okay, do you have all of your corporate governance documents put together? Have you kind of thoughtfully built this out as a real business? Or is this just you and with your grit and your handshakes going around? It's much more difficult to sell a business that doesn't have all of the foundational documents that you need and the procedures and the processes. If you're thinking about selling your business, that means someone else has to step into your shoes. And most founders know they do everything. They know everything. So how can you create something where you can actually be replaced? And that is hard for founders. My dad was an entrepreneur for probably 25, 30 years. And that was one of the hardest things for him, was to both kind of not micromanage the business and let it scale, but also towards the end of the day, create the processes and the procedures that could allow him to be replaced. And he managed to do it. But I know, especially in the beginning, when you're building it out, you're the person who knows everything. It is very hard to do that. It's not everyone's first reaction to make themselves replaceable somehow. But like I was saying, the corporate governance documents, all of that comes together to make your business something that can be sold and can be acquired, and people are interested in buying.
Something that I also encounter a lot, and I'm always tactful and careful. Early on, particularly in my investment advising career, I made this mistake a lot. I'll willingly admit it. I'll have a husband and wife, blended family. and they'll tell me they're getting ready to start up a business. And it was like I was just so I wouldn't say uncouth, but I was just so clumsy about it. Right? I'd be looking at the husband, I'd be looking at the wife, and I'm like, have you considered what's going to transpire if one of you falls out of love with each other, if one of you, let's say you meet your maker, right?
Yeah.
No one rehearses funerals, but they happen all day, every day, right?
Yes.
What is the message you would deliver to business owners who have blended families, and also the message you would deliver in the sense that, look, you want everyone to be happy, you want everyone to feel whole if something happens to you, but there are certain situations where you don't want that child who, I don't know, maybe a bit flighty, they're still kind of learning themselves, whatever the case may be. You don't necessarily want them inheriting the business. Maybe you want to pass that business on to the other child that is more engaged, takes things a little bit more seriously.
Yeah. Especially in a blended family, this can be a really difficult situation, especially if both spouses are coming in with kids from a prior relationship. That is just a taxing, situation. I mean, look, as an attorney, you're dealing with people first. And so it's hard to give a heuristic without really having the folks in front of me. But a really good attorney is a trusted advisor. They don't just come to you for the agreements. They start coming to you for your business advice, life advice. I mean, they really start to trust you, if you do a good job, with a lot of different factors of their life. And so if you're dealing with a situation like this, I think it's important to just approach it from a people first perspective, which is we're trying to build something for your kids' future, something that lasts, something that's durable. And you have to have real conversations about it. It doesn't mean that everyone doesn't have a place, but where's everyone's best place? And where is the place where they will grow and succeed the most? And so I think having those conversations, they can be difficult, no doubt. But you're doing something more difficult when you're creating a business and also have to stay in love with each other on top of it. That is a totally different ballgame than two founders who, can butt heads, and you don't have to have someone sleeping on the couch. It's a totally different ballgame. So I think when founders come in and they are in a committed relationship, I think they do know, and I think they have to know that this is something different than just a business. You're trying to build a family legacy, whatever, tap into whatever it is that really drives them, and just keep that the focus. So like, this is what you guys were so excited about. This is why you created this business. Keep that the focus, and how can everyone best support? We all have our role to play. Where will everyone be best suited so they can thrive as well?
Okay. Last couple questions. I know we need to start wrapping up here. What are some things or some habits that business owners can incorporate into their daily, maybe more appropriately, weekly or monthly modus operandus to keep things from falling apart, to continue to build value and create a situation where they just can avoid a lot of the landmines and issues that can come up?
One of the things I would suggest is actually blocking out specific time for specific tasks. I know in my day, I'm fielding calls constantly. I have new meetings being scheduled. If I don't have a plan going into that day, or I have not set time aside on a weekly basis to do X, Y, and Z, it's not going to get done. There's too many other fires to put out. Or I'm too exhausted at the end of the week. Whatever, like, we have all these reasons. So when you're thinking about these sorts of things that are not as fun, but are extremely important for the success of your business, block out 30 minutes, block out an hour once, twice a week, where all you're going to do is look at some of the more legal landmine aspects, sides of your business. If you have the money to work with an attorney, awesome. Have a half-hour meeting with them once every 2-3 weeks, whatever you need, and just talk through the issues. And the attorney will say, well, did you think about this? Oh, have you thought about this? And that is how you can just stay proactively addressing these issues. Without an attorney, obviously, it's extremely difficult. But what you can always do, even just on your own, is think through the liability. Think through what's the worst thing that could happen here, and how would I want that to be addressed? Do I have a contract that addresses that? No, I need one. Right? So that's kind of what attorneys do, is we think through all the possible futures where things could go wrong, how they could go right, and everything in between, and we plan for those. And so as a business owner, if you're at least doing the planning,
you'll have a better insight in terms of when do I need an attorney.
Man, that just led to 3 other questions. I know we're definitely gonna have this conversation again. But last question: what is it that's something you wish people would stop believing, specifically as it relates to LLCs, like these beliefs or assumptions they have? What do you would say? Look, we need to correct this right away.
I'm so glad you asked this because there's something I wanted to touch on earlier. Actually, 2 things, if you don't mind. One is about the liability shield itself. I referenced earlier that people, once they have their LLC, they feel kind of immune to everything that can go wrong. There's a lot of ways where that's not true. One of them, there's something in law called piercing the corporate veil. And when this happens is usually if the business has committed fraud or if the business is commingling. So I'll use an example. It's simpler this way. If you are, let's use our example of the junk removal company, single member LLC, you never create a business bank account. You just, every time you do a job, it goes right into your personal bank account. You just have commingled your business funds. Sometimes you buy a new tire, you buy a new uniform, whatever it is for the business. The rest of the time, same account. You're just doing your personal expenses. If something goes wrong and you get sued, the other party can, even if they can't fully pierce the corporate veil, all of your funds can be jeopardized by that. Same if there's fraud and they pierce through that liability shield. That's what piercing the corporate veil is. If you're committing fraud, they're going to let you go directly through that liability shield, and then your personal assets can be up for litigation. People feel like they don't need insurance. They say, I don't need insurance. I have a liability shield, right? So those are all important things about LLCs that I wish people would really consider. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, this has to do with liability and kind of spreading liability. It's not as, I should say this, strategically, you can use business entities to protect your assets even better by having multiple entities interfacing in different organizational groups. So for instance, and this is kind of the classic example, if you're a business that owns 15 residential housing units, you're going to hold every single one of those residential units in a separate holding company, a separate LLC. And there's really good reason for that. So if someone slips and falls at one of your residential units and they sue you, what they're suing is that holding company that has that asset for you, that revenue, that building. So that's what's in jeopardy. If you had all 15 under the same LLC and you get sued by someone falling in one of your properties, all 15 properties are now subject to this litigation. And so if you do what you're supposed to do, if you set up your business bank account, if you treat it like a business, you pay yourself out of it in ways that make sense, you keep it separate from your personal assets, and you don't commit fraud, the liability shield is strong. If you don't do those things, your personal assets can be involved even when you didn't think that was the case.
Okay. All right, last question.
Yeah.
Everybody believes they're an influencer. Everybody believes their content is worth millions of gobs of dollars, right?
Yes.
And you'll have people who have these misunderstandings that just because they post something on Instagram, it's mine. I post something on TikTok, it's mine. I record something on YouTube, it's mine. No one can utilize my content or repurpose my content. Just general advice. What would you give to individuals who don't quite understand that landscape?
I would say I understand the impulse, and it's something that you created and you are the copyright holder. Absolutely. I'd say 2 things. One is there are exceptions to copyright in terms of how other people can use your content. They can create derivative works. They can create educational content out of it. Just because you've created something and posted it doesn't mean it's completely hands-off. No one else can touch my content. It's just not how the law works. The other thing I'll say is when you're interfacing with these platforms, we've become so accustomed to just clicking accept on the terms and conditions. No one's going to read those. No consumer is going to read the terms and conditions. I get it. I don't read them and I'm a lawyer. But in there are very strict guidelines and rules about who owns what when something is posted, who can interface with it, who can copy it, who can, all of the rules of engagement for those applications are in the terms of service. So just because you are posting something doesn't mean other people can't interface with it in creative ways. They can't steal it, sure, but they can. I mean, you see these all the times, the sort of response videos where people are responding and they'll play someone else's video and then they'll cut in every 15, 20, 2 minutes, whatever it is, to make a statement on top of it. That is a fair use, under copyright law. So it's important for people to know that there are exceptions to that general rule, that what I create is mine and no one else can touch it.
All right. 2 questions, we're done.
Cool.
Short. Right now, what book or books would you recommend that have fed your entrepreneurial soul?
Wow, that's a great question. Here's an interesting one, and this is going to be a roundabout answer.
Okay.
So I'm a big sci-fi guy.
Okay.
I love science fiction. I listen to growth podcasts, and there's things I like Tom Bilyeu's Impact Theory. I really like. But I found I'll call it, in a pejorative sense, the rise and grind culture. After a while, for me, was extremely grating. I'm just seeing video after video of the guy who's waking up at 4 a.m. and the next guy's waking up at 3 a.m. and they've all. It felt like there was. I got very attached to that motive for a while, and so there were a couple books that helped kind of break me out of the rat race in a way, and they're going to sound bizarre and no one's going to read them. One of them is by my favorite philosopher. His name's Bernardo Kastrup.
Okay.
And it's Why Materialism is Wrong. And it's a very strange philosophy book, but it was such a sort of pointed rebuke of a lot of my misconceptions about life, and so it just helped me at kind of a transformative period move on. I'm trying to think of just a business book. Let me ask you, what's one that you've read recently that you think is super impactful?
There's actually a book that I reread, Success Principles by Jack Canfield.
I've never heard of that. I'm write it down.
That book I would attribute to literally increasing my income. Like, it helped me double my income after I read that book.
What was the author again?
Jack Canfield, Success Principles.
Okay.
Early on in my entrepreneur journey, I had a chip on my shoulder, and I was so conscious about proving that I was effective, proving that you need to respect me, proving that I deserve the credibility. And that book helped me soften my edges and understand that business isn't just simply executing a job or a chore. It is relationships.
Yes.
And if you don't come from an entrepreneurial background, or you don't come from an environment where entrepreneurship, at least legally, isn't promoted, you don't understand some of these cultural norms, principles, and values that are underlying every interaction, right? Also, it helped me in terms of having positive expectation, right? So you have people who say, fake it till you make it. I believe in faith in it till you make it, that if you have faith, that you operate with a certain spirit, you have a certain modus operandus, you have a certain ideal, the end in mind, that you will grow, you will prosper, right? That book was really instrumental in that. So whenever I come across individuals, to be transparent with you, I probably shouldn't say this because I'm thinking about people I've referred this book to. But when I come across individuals who I just want to say maybe have a bad attitude, maybe a tad bit too pessimistic, or they lack belief in humanity and the fact that you can create win-win relationships, I recommend that book.
That was beautiful.
Yeah.
That was great.
Yeah.
It made me think of Brene Brown. People may know her. She's kind of become a famous speaker at this point. I forget the name of her book, but it did something similar for me as you were describing that. It made me think of that book. And it's really just about relationships and empathy, and but it does have a lot of business context to it. And as I get further and further into my career, I'm amazed how much of this is just, it's all relationships. Everything is just relationships. You can come in and sell. There's people who are just unbelievably talented at coming in, and they might be the best in their field. I watch them get outcompeted by someone who's better at relationships every single day of the week.
Mm-hmm.
It is unbelievable. So whatever, your story was great, but rounding yourself out to be able to connect with people, for young men, I see a lot of overestimation of one's abilities and too much ego, right? Finding ways to tone that down and actually connect with people instead of worrying about how am I being perceived, who's respecting me. Earn the respect. Become someone who is respectable, right?
Right.
So anyway, thank you for sharing. That's great.
Yeah. People ultimately do business with folks whom they like, know, and trust.
Yeah. Yeah.
And oftentimes it's more important that you lead with that in mind than whatever the deal may be.
Absolutely.
All right. So last question. I know you got to get up out of here. And thank you for your time. This has just been invaluable. As I'm sitting here looking at my notes, I'm thinking about 50 other questions I could pose right now.
Let's do a round two sometime.
Yes.
I'm here for it.
For people who want to continue discussion and engage with you, what would be the most effective means to do so?
I would love if they would connect with me on LinkedIn. It's so fun for me to see what other people are doing. I want to keep up to date with whatever they're working on. I want to learn about it. But it's an easy way for them to see my more professional achievements or whatever I have going on. So if you're going to post this, maybe we can attach LinkedIn or something to that. You can also go to our firm website, alglawpc, like personalcomputer.com. You'll see all the attorneys there. You can read my firm profile, and it's an easy way to contact, the firm or myself.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much.
I'm excited about this. If you can't tell, I'm a little bit of a nerd, and I'll tell you the one thing I miss about the academic environment is having more nuanced conversations like this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, I know our audience are going to benefit tremendously from this conversation. Thank you again.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes.